Hello everyone, welcome to another Reaper blog tutorial. Today we're going to talk about network processing for plugins using a function that is included with Reaper called ReaMote. That's R-E-A-M-O-T-E. I've got two computers set up. They're both MacBook Pros. One is an old Core 2 Duo 2009 13-inch model. Pretty old, not very powerful, but we can use it for a little bit of extra processing. And my main system is a 2015 15-inch, it's an i7 quad-core. So it's a decent system, but it's not like the best. And I will be doing this in Mac just because I only have Macs, but you can absolutely do this on PC as well. And in some situations, you can even do Mac as your main system and a PC as your remote system. There's not a lot of information about this online, so there's a bit of trial and error, and you'll probably see me make some mistakes throughout the process here, but we're gonna just see how it goes. Hey guys, John from the future here. I've seen how this video goes. It's not great. I want to take some time to actually summarize some of the key points that I think I didn't explain well enough in this video. So the first one is that the main system is going to run Reaper. The slave system is going to run the remote app. So they're not both running Reaper. The next thing is that this will work with VST, Audio Unit, and JSFX. They need to be the same format on both systems. So you can't load an audio unit on your remote system while having a VST in your main system. That's just not going to work. It won't happen. The next thing is that the plugin versions need to be the exact same. So for example, I had Isotope RX 4 installed on my remote system, but when I went to add it to my main project, it would not load both versions. There was just some minor version number difference. It wouldn't launch the plugin on the remote system. Local processing was fine though. I also ran into some issues with plugins that just took a lot of delay compensation. In the video I'm showing with REAPER, but that didn't seem to have any issues. But it was some of the tone boosters plugins I had on both systems. Same version, same name, all that kind of stuff. But I ended up with some error messages popping up. I tried changing the network buffer setting to 1400, and that seemed to help the issue. But most of the time, if you're getting an error pop up, you're going to have to set that effects chain to local processing and then back to the remote before it will try it again. But before you can do that, you'll probably have to tweak some of the preferences. And the last thing I want to mention is that my remote system is running on Wi-Fi, so the processing is not going to be as good as if it was wired. Best case scenario, you can have a fast Ethernet connection, and all these systems are networked really well. And something else that just occurred to me is that this is only going to be for your local system. This is not, you can't use someone else's computer in another house, that sort of thing, to process your plugins. It has to be same local network. So yeah, that's it. Back to the video. In Reaper's preferences, there is a page called Plugins and ReaMote, and you can enable remote processing. Then you're going to have to search for another computer that is remote enabled. And so that's going to be on my other computer. And before we can do that, we need to actually install the ReaMote app. And so it's a separate app. You're not running two versions of Reaper on different computers. You're running Reaper on your main system and ReaMote on your external system. And on PC, this is just an option inside the installer. But on the Mac, you just drag that extra application into the applications folder. So I've already done that, and you can see how that looks in the installer. But I'm just going to double click this to open it up. And so it's just this little console window, essentially. And it's just going to list what it's doing. This computer has 35 AU plugins, 64 VST plugins, 383 JSFX. And it is listening for incoming connections. I'm going to try to connect on my main system. Okay, so I got it connected by just clicking edit and then okay, and then it connected. As I said before, I haven't done a lot of testing on this. There's not a lot of things I can even read about this. There was a couple paragraphs in the user guide about it, essentially explaining what it is, but not how to set it up. or any of the things that can go wrong with it. But in my very brief testing, I did find several things that just didn't work for me. Hopefully we'll have better luck today. There are a couple different options here. Sample format, 64-bit or 32-bit. The remote computer is going to be on Wi-Fi and battery powered, so I might need to change the bandwidth option here for 32-bit, and we could also change the block size or render ahead milliseconds and things like that. So all of these things are adding in delays so that we can get nice, clean performance. And when that's enabled, we will see this new box at the top of the effects chain for local processing or remote processing. So if I enable this for remote number 1, and then when I add in a plugin, and the plugins have to be the same on both computers, then we'll see this come up. You usually want to do this with plugins that are actually quite heavy. I don't have a lot that are, but I'm going to try some UHI virtual instruments a little bit later and see. But anyways, I have REAPER added in here. This is actually running on the external computer. And if we look over on the other computer, we see added new VST plugin to chain. I'm going to hit play and see if there's like any sort of delay before it starts. Doesn't seem to. I'm going to add in a couple more and see if we can get any error messages coming up here. So there's a huge amount of latency in here. Seems to be working okay though. We're not doing anything. We're not using really any CPU here. My external computer is saying about 6% CPU. If we switch this to local processing, the other computer says removed effects chain and CPU usage went down to 0. My local computer is saying it's not really doing much. This is still less than 1%, but I guess this plugin isn't doing anything yet. So I'm just going to remove all these from the effects chain. Now let's try a virtual instrument. So I'm actually going to do insert virtual instrument on new track, and I installed UHI Tyrell. Let's first see how the latency is here. Got this on 1024, which is a lot. There's a noticeable amount of delay when I press the keys, but that is kind of to be expected from that large buffer size. But let's try it on the external one and see if this works at all. Okay, so nearly 2 seconds of delay. So for live instruments, probably not a great option, but if it's programmed stuff, it should work fine. How about I just put in an arpeggiator. Now let's see how long of a delay there is when actually switching things. So there's about a 2-second delay tweaking plugin parameters as well. So in the other computer, when it's running, it's about 13% CPU, which is quite a lot. I think running it locally, it's going to be a lot lower. But I don't know. It's something that maybe I don't necessarily need, but my sessions are often very small. I've had people asking me about this as an option. Yeah, because there wasn't a lot of information, I didn't really have an answer. So. Yeah, running locally, this is only taking 1% CPU, and running as a remote, there's a lot of delay, and it's taking 13% of that CPU. But the thing is, you can buy cheap, powerful computers these days, and you can have multiple remotes. So if your session is really big and you have the ability to get all of these computers to have the same versions of the plugins and all that kind of stuff, this could be a really good way to do things. You could write the music with local processing, low latency, and then move the processing over to one of these other computers and then free up your local CPU. Then latency is not really an issue and you can continue working. So just as an example of trying to kind of overload this, maybe, I'm going to duplicate this track a few times. So now we've got 6 tracks of Tyrell, and we've got, I'm going to put in 1 track of Podolsky and switch this one to remote. Yeah, let's draw something in, and I'll just copy that a bunch of times. So I've got 6 tracks of each. I'm going to mute this because it's going to sound horrible, but we'll get the idea of how much CPU load we can set offline. Yeah, so all of these plugins are set to the remote. And so my external computer is running at 95% CPU. But actually you're not getting any crackles. I'm going to attempt to lower my buffer size here. Set this to 64 and see how this goes. If this will work at all. No, that's not working at all. 512 seems okay. And so that's using quite a lot of CPU on my other computer, but almost nothing on my local computer. So that's great. 5% CPU on this computer just from running that many tracks. And the other computer is idle at 14% and active 90 or so. You can set this to a 32-bit audio transfer. We can also adjust the number of blocks. Render send ahead. We could probably set this to 250. In my earlier testing, I did change the max packet size to 1400, just because that's what was suggested there, but it's not really a lot of other information about that. So let's try just changing the render send ahead to 250 milliseconds. It's kind of glitched, and one of these has got a stuck note now. So there you go. That is how you set up and use remote network processing for Reaper. It doesn't really work in my case because I have this crappy old laptop. It's just not very powerful. And for my use case, I'm just not really maxing out this computer very often anyways. But it is something that is possible, and you can run multiple remote computers. If you don't want to use subprojects or freeze, this is one option you can use. Just keep adding in computers, or if you have an extra computer that you're not usually using while you're mixing, you can offload some of the processing to this other computer. There is that latency issue, but it's an option. It's nice that we can do this. You don't have to have a high-end computer for this network processing. You can actually get some cheap computers that will do this really well. Here's an example of the Intel NUC. It's a very compact computer. This is $234. You can just have a stack of these little computers for like $300 each and get a lot more processing. There's a lot of different models of these. This is just kind of the first one that came up in Google search. There's a channel called Snazzy Labs, and he used one of these to make a Mac Mini killer. He just posted that yesterday. So that was a really cool video if you want to check that out. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. You can join our Facebook group, Reaper Blog Community. Support the Reaper blog through Patreon, and visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.